Hi there, Frank Winston here for the Pacifica Historical Society, host of the show Footprints of Pacifica, where we explore the lure and the lore of lovely Pacifica, its character and its characters. Our show focuses on the Ocean Shore Railroad and not merely the car that brought us from San Francisco down to Pacifica or the coastside in the early 1900s, but specifically car 1409, which has been located and transferred to Pacifica so it could be restored in its original pleasure. Our guests tonight, John Schmalley and Scott Linder, who have been heavily involved in this project. But to remember more about the Ocean Shore Railroad and its impact on the coastside, we have a video, and let's roll the tape now.
In 1905, before you could drive south on the old coast road, a company was formed and a railroad was born, going where none dared to go. From Golden Gate south on a hair-raising route, across the Devil's Hillside, was a breathtaking, knee-shaking, cliff-hanging hell of a ride. All aboard the ocean shore, chugging down that old coastline, like the way that she did when your granddad was a kid on the ocean shore, 1409.
We kind of discovered it here about 10 years ago. I was walking down the old railroad right-of-way, which is right over here, and there's an old railroad car along the right-of-way, and I looked and you could see this old car here, so I came up and approached the owners of the property, the previous owners, or the owners that are here now, and let me go and everything, and we looked at the numbers in the car. The numbers are 1409, which is way too high a numbering for the local railroads around here. They didn't have that high a number, so we thought maybe it's Southern Pacific or something like that. So we got a hold of one of the members of the Northwestern Pacific Historical Society, and one of the members of the Western Railway Museum in Rio Vista. And the Northwestern Pacific member Alan Tacey came over. We took dimensions and he looked at the numbers, looked the car all over, and then he went back to the archives, and the next morning he shows up with a book and he says, "This is Ocean Shore number 1409, and he totally identified the car. The next morning, Paul Trimble shows up, and he says, "I think that's Ocean Shore 1409. He says, "That's a rare piece." He says, "That's a real artifact." So I says, "Let's go down and take a look at it, Paul." So we came down here, and Paul looked at it, and he says, "Oh man," he says, "that's a hopeless case." And I says, "Well, that's 100 and something years old. That's a really a beautiful artifact, and has a potential, for a restoration. And it looks like there's going to be a happy ending to this story." So I'm thrilled to death.
My name's Doug E. Bright, and this is my daughter Amy.
Hi.
And we have been enjoying this train car here for probably 17 years. I think we bought the property in '87. And it was covered with ivy. We didn't even know it was a rail car for the first couple of years, and it actually had a roof built over the top of it up until about 2 weeks ago, where we tore that off and exposed the true car in its beauty. And it was used for storage all these years. About a couple months ago, we've decided to clear the area where the car is sitting. So we thought, well, we'll put the word out there if there's any chance to anybody may want it, or even parts of it, because we were going to demolish it. And Jeff Miller put the network word out, and a lot of people have been coming by, and everybody said, oh, she's a little far gone, but you know, we'd be interested in some of the hardware in there when you finally tear it down. And it wasn't until one of the final contacts, which was Kathleen Manning from Pacifica, showed a lot of enthusiasm and said, she's perfect. We're gonna take it, and with our volunteers, we're gonna restore it, and that's where we stand right now. So it's just great news, and I've always felt that it was a burden to be the person to give the old car a death sentence and have to tear it down, and this is a great ending, so I can't wait to see it in its glory again.
The plan is that we'll get this back to Pacifica, and through community effort with a lot of volunteers and a lot of good labor and good times, we will get this car back to what it was before. And we'll use it as, hopefully, as a museum in the city of Pacifica, a museum to the Ocean Shore Railway. It'll be one of the few cars in existence from this railroad, and it'll certainly be the only museum devoted to the Ocean Shore Railway. It's going to be very unique on the coast. It's going to be very exciting, and I think that the community will have a lot of fun doing it. I've had a lot of calls already from people that are excited about it and want to partake. I think it's going to be a real plus and a real happy experience for everyone.
Yeah, get that low boy flatbed in here and we'll be able to pull it around there and get it down to
Keep my
Pacifica.
fingers crossed the truss rod they're hanging under there. Then you got a real baby buggy move, you know.
Well, if that steel undercarriage is in good shape, it should raise really easily.
I think looking at the floor in there, there's steel in that car.
The I-beam, which is constructed of steel, is the most important thing because that is what's built. It's for your foundation, and from there you have to go up like a house. And the I-beam is intact. It's in good shape. It hasn't corroded to the point where we're going to have to replace it. We could sandblast it. We could paint it and go from there. And a lot of the wood is really in good shape. It just has to be finished, sanded, primered, and painted. And the thing that's very unique about this coach is a wood coach. The Ocean Shore had two different versions of coaches. There was a wood coach and a steel coach. And if it would have been a steel coach, it probably would have been far more deteriorated. The wood actually holds out longer than the steel. And being in the condition where it's at under the trees and stuff, a lot of it's been preserved for the restoration stage. Now what we're doing here today is we're doing drawings, how we're going to keep it together in the move. And also the drawings are going to be very important because when we're restoring it, we're going to need to actually know where everything went before we took it apart. The plans of the association is to get this whole back to the way it used to be in 1920 with a beautiful working model of the railroad in here for the public to view and enjoy and go back in time and experience the way it was back then in 1920. And try to keep it as close as possible to what it was originally. We're going to try to find the exact paint it was modeled. We're going to do everything to trim exactly the same way, but the most important thing is we have something to be proud of because the Ocean Shore Railroad was a railroad that ran from 1906 to 1920. It was a very unique railroad because if it wasn't for the Ocean Shore Railroad, we wouldn't have some of the towns and communities. The Ocean Shore opened the avenues for business, commerce, and for people to find out about the beautiful town we live in and the other towns like Half Moon Bay.
The railroad planted the seeds of change. 100 miles were traveled in a day. So dreamers came to find paradise in the fields of Half Moon Bay. Janitas Creek, thick with redwood trees, where salmon ran wild. At Duarte's bar, fueled by bootleg drink, traveling bones rested for a while. All aboard the Ocean Shore, chugging down that old coastline, like the way that she did when your granddad was a kid on the Ocean Shore 1409.
So back in November 2004, we took a crew up there and we started excavating it from the ground, putting it on a truck and bringing it down here. And so now it sits down here after a 3-month process. The trucker brought it down and now we're going to restore it through the Pacifica Historical Society and members of the Ocean Shore Railroad Volunteer Project Committee, and we've had a number of fundraisers, and we're starting to have money come in. And we're working today with a group from the 4-H who is involved with us, and we're starting to continue today to unwrap it. It's been wrapped up since the winter. And up in here you can see the car as it stands. The roof structure's in pretty good shape. The rafters and are somewhat rotten. You can see on this side we removed this whole wall section, and the only thing left is the steel framing that's attached to the cantilever roof. And it's called the clear story, where the windows are right now have all been removed. We have them in storage. They're all the interior trim in this car is you can see it's painted, but it's actually red mahogany. For the back section over here, you can see all the wall paneling over here is natural woodwork, all out of mahogany, and so we want to replicate it back into its original condition. The car has been registered in the train registry, and the number of the car, 1409, can still be seen up on the top clear story section. It goes back to the registry of 6 cars that were purchased brand new for the Ocean Shore Railroad Company back in 1905. And this is the last of a set of those series of 5 cars. So it's a very unique car. None of the, as I know, none of the cars from the Ocean Shore Railroad have ever been restored. And so this is a very unique project, and here in Pacifica, it's a lot of good interest in it, and it's kind of an exciting little project.
Railroad's the foundation of this town. This old ghost car here is a big part of our history. And it's a privilege working on it. Look at this. We've been wondering where they got the steel from. Whoever made this frame, that'll be their number. That'll be a reference to them. What we think is that the guys at the Holman factory bought a kit from someplace back east, the steel pieces. Then they assembled it, and then using the then cheap and plentiful redwood, well, not redwood actually, mostly pine, they did carpentry and built the car. You see, their specialty was the woodwork.
After the Ocean Shore Railroad went broke in 1920, they sold the car to Bechtel apparently, because we uncovered the Bechtel construction painted on the side of it. So apparently they used it as a field office or something of the sort. We don't know for how long. We contacted them and asked if they had a historian that could fill in the blanks for us, and at the time they didn't have any record of it, but we're going to try again later on when we have time, because surely somebody would have some memory of it, and it'd be kind of a kick to know what happened to it during the 20s and 30s. And we don't know how long it was just sitting in the backyard of the gentleman that let us have the car up in Sebastopol. That could have been a great number of years. Before we're done, we hope to fill in all the blanks in the history of the car and present it all as part of the museum display when it's finished.
But the ocean shore was no match to Southern Pacific's attack. They took her logs and her revenues, left her abandoned track. So when you drive on the Highway 1, pause to reflect on the view. You're traveling on the ocean shore right of way, dreams that have come true. All aboard, my railroad friends, let's journey down that old coast side, relive that memory of not so long ago on the ocean shore 1409. All aboard, my railroad friends, let's journey down that old coast side, relive that memory of not so long ago on the ocean shore 1409.
I'd like to welcome to our studio John Schmalley and Scott Lindner. John, you are a railroad buff, but in particular in this particular car, 1409, you had a major role in rescuing it for Pacifica. Could you tell us how that came about?
Well, I got email and then a phone call and a rumor, and I went to visit the car with Jeff Millerick, and I took one turn down the driveway and I say, "That's the Ocean Shore car." There's no doubt. And I knew that some of the institutions did not want the car. So I called the one person I knew from Pacifica that would really get things rolling. That was Kathleen Manning. And she was delighted, and she was lucky to have Scott involved. And from that point on, it got a life of its own.
Now, you and Kathleen actually are in the same kind of business in a
Right.
different location. What's that?
I sell and collect, of course, antique paper, manuscripts, gold rush letters,
So it
things.
wasn't strange for you to come across that kind, and you knew Kathleen and the
Right.
role in Pacifica. So Scott, that's fine. How did you get involved in this?
Well, actually, at the time that John had called Kathleen, I was there next to Kathleen when she got the phone call, and she was ecstatic that she had gotten this phone call that there was an Ocean Shore rail car in Sebastopol, and that it was being given to her, and she had to find a way to get it down here, and I volunteered to help her.
And you have some background in construction?
That's right.
Any background in railroad restoration?
None whatsoever. Actually, I regress on that because our company, Made in Jensen, has been helping, and we have in the past. We had done a project for Bechtel Corporation, their car that's sitting in front of Bechtel in San Francisco right now. We had brought that down to our shop and had restored that, so I had a little bit of experience with that.
And it's been down here now about 2 years. We saw in the video that you brought it, you passed it through the Golden Gate Bridge, as a matter of fact. How was that?
Yes, on a Sunday afternoon, after 3 months of work in Sebastopol, we had finally were able to get it on a moving truck for Trost equipment. And a young fellow had driven it out of Sebastopol at 35 miles an hour, and he didn't stop. He hit the freeway at 50 and went across the Golden Gate Bridge at sunset. It was a beautiful shot.
And where did it end up now here in Pacifica
Right now,
specifically?
yes, right now it's resting at Shamrock Ranch. It's a non-incorporated part of Pacifica, and they've graciously given us their space to restore the car there, and it sits there now under a shelter.
If someone wanted to visit it or work on it, it's open to the public. How's it stand right now?
Right now it's open to the public one weekend out of the month. We have a volunteer work party that goes down, and open to any and all volunteers who would like or are interested in the Ocean Shore Railroad. And we've been working on it for now about 2 years, and starting to put it back together.
Well, as a historian of this, what actually needs to be done to put it together? I mean, was it just a shell, or did it have windows, chairs? What condition was it?
When I first saw it, it was gutted. It had no seats. The ends, steps, and the ends had been cut off. It had no handrails. Basically a shell.
And no wheels?
It had a frame.
No wheels
No
either?
trucks, no couplers.
What's your vision now of it? It can be restored. You're working on it. What's the progress at this point?
Well, at this point, we've gone through the demolition phase where we've removed the rotten beams and rotten wood, removed rotten steel that was deteriorated beyond use, and new steel's been incorporated into it. We've templated holes for connections and welded it back on. So the next stage is ready to relaminate the structural lumber to the undercarriage and start building from the bottom up.
Now, to do this, you have to do history of the Holman company that manufactured it in the 1910s, or do you get architectural plans, or do you just wing it, look at some great photographs that have been held, and just say, let's duplicate that with today's properties? How do you do that?
Well, basically, John would tell you that there's really no working drawings of the car right now. So we're working off an as-built situation, trying to duplicate the dimensions that are intact on the car and reconstructing from the actual dimensions of the car itself. So we're not working off any relative blueprints to the car.
John, did you ever anticipate that the city of Pacifica, not just a few history buffs, would welcome it and do so much and work to actually restore it and bring it to use the schools here as labor and skills and such.
Yeah, it's a wonderful community project, and it really, the cars, if it could smile, it would be smiling. It's at home, and it's more than just a piece of steel and wood and, you know, various things, tangible things. It's got a history, and that car ran through every town in Pacifica, and it should really be saved.
Running from San Francisco.
San Francisco.
San Francisco didn't want it. The Rio Vista State Railroad Museum, nobody wanted it. You saw something in it, or just the fact that no railroad car should be destroyed because railroads have some meaning in history?
Well, there's another car similar to this car, but this particular car was available and had to be saved. It had 2 weeks before it was going to be bulldozed into dirt. And I happened to have that flash went off in my head, Kathleen Manning, and she's the one. And then thank God Scott got on board, and the thing, it's going to be saved.
What do you have to do with regard to volunteers and money for the product? Because you're indicating you're going to try to restore the seats, you're going to add the lumber, get the birch lumber you said was like the kind they have here.
Right.
But you're going to basically rebuild the whole inside.
We'd like to restore it to its original condition. It had a fine mahogany interior. Much of it's still intact. It can be restored and refinished.
You mean that kind of lumber is still available?
It is still available. It's hard to find. A lot of the framing was all white oak. It's vertical grain white oak, which is almost non-existent. It's hard to get material like that. The timbers that were used for the undercarriage were a 45-foot length. You can't even find lumber of that line. We're trying to find 22-footers right now. Special milling sizes, so that's being lined up.
The question that we didn't respond to is the money. Or how, you know, you maybe get some donations. Do people donate wood, or just we have people donate services? Where do you get the supplies?
Well, we're trying to use all our resources through shows like this and the PR and getting it out to the public. We are having private contributions which help. We've been going through quite a number of fundraisers. We just had a fireworks booth, garage sales. We've written a grant for Terra Nova High School and in cooperation with their woodshop teacher in the fall to try to get some money and have the advanced woodworking students do some production phases on the car.
So they'd be working on something not just woodwork, but something that has a whole meaning for the history of this community.
Yes, it's very unique in that aspect.
Is there anything that's involved in lighting and sound that would replicate that, or did it have fixtures in that regard?
I believe this car had electric lights, it had steam heat, and it had plush reversible seats, and the seats can be duplicated. The lighting is probably, could find similar. And as far as the interior, you know, the mahogany, as Scott said, is pretty hard to find.
Now, how many cars were there at the time at the most? 6 or 7?
There were 5 of these built, identical to this car.
Yeah, they were identical.
By Holman. Now, is Holman still in existence, the manufacturer? Do they have any archives on this?
No, an interesting thing about Holman is they built cars for Ocean Shore and took stock as payment, stock in Ocean Shore.
Stock in the Ocean Shore.
And that led partially to their bankruptcy in 1914. So
Of Holman.
Holman went bankrupt in 1914.
Of course, the Ocean Shore Railroad went bankrupt first in 1910 and then got reliquidated and then lasted until about the 1920s.
Yeah.
As far as this project is concerned, when do you foresee it? You're the project manager and have been since you brought it down here.
Yes.
When do you have a foresight, or does that partly depend on money, materials, and people, and so on? You've got the people.
Very valid question. Yes. Randy Hees is director of Ardenwood on the other side of the Dumbarton Bridge. They've restored cars, and professionally he came to one of our first meetings and prepared us to the fact that their car took 9 years and $300,000 to complete. So we're into 2 years and about $15,000, and we're just at the ground level coming up. So
When it's finished, is it to be available to the public for viewing or for what?
There's no final resting place for the car right now. We're trying to restore it back to its original condition. There are a lot of scenarios. One, we bring it next to the Little Brown Church, if that ever aspires, and also possibly bring it into Rockaway Beach with the People's Development Corporation. So there's some different options out there.
But it's not leaving the coast side. It's not even leaving Pacifica.
No.
It belongs here.
It belongs here.
So,
Okay. Do you know anything about the history of the song that we just heard, which is a railroad song, to be sure?
no, but it has a good beat.
It has that. Okay. I'm also wondering if the people who are involved now really knew anything about the railroad, or everybody is brand new. When you brought it back, it put a new face on Pacifica's history, that the people involved now, none of them are railroad people. Your volunteer types?
A few are.
Really?
Yeah, we've had a fellow, Mike Huggins, is very involved in the railroad community. He's done a little bit of research for us. We've established a Yahoo group site with about 55 members throughout museums in California. I think a little bit of input from that. We have our own website, oceanshorerailroad.com. You can visit, and we've been getting input from that. So it's slowly coming in.
And John, is there anything else that you think is most outstanding in your role as the rescuer of the Ocean Shore Railroad Car 1409?
I'm very gratified to see it at home. It's in its resting spot, and it's really needs to stay here, and it needs to be completed. And it's a tangible piece of history. 1909, built in San Francisco, ran on these tracks from its inception till the railroad closed in 1920. Went to various railroads, found its way to Sebastopol. Now it's home.
And now you're home here. You came down from your home, John Schmalzy. I want to thank you for coming back and for rescuing the car, and Scott for your efforts in rallying the city to do as much as it could. That's our show for this particular focus on 1409. For those of you who want further information, Pacifica Historical Society, P.O. Box 752, Pacifica 94044, telephone 650-359-5462. Have a website, www.pacificahistory.org. So we appreciate your watching the show, and we're going to close now, but remember that lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and in parting, leave behind us footprints in the sands of time.